Hi, I'm the Moonlit Page Turner, and these are my fourth quarter reads of 2025. They are all the books that I read or started to read and DNF'd, because I have a couple of them, in October, November, and December. And if you're seeing this, it's going to be put out at the beginning of 2026. That's because I used all 31 days in December to try to finish the books that I had started. I was trying to jam a couple of them in yesterday, 31st, but I didn't quite finish them, so you'll see them next time. I do have 4 categories that I put these books in. I have book club books, and I'm in 2 book clubs, Savvy Gaming Network and the Read the World series that I have here on YouTube. I am going to talk about nonfiction books, which I'm going to try to read more of next year. So 2026, my goal is to read more nonfiction books, especially the ones that I own, because I own quite a few that have been sitting on my shelf for a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about fiction. And this year I have also added a category of banned books. I don't have a whole lot of banned books this time around, but I do have a couple of them for you. The first category are the book clubs that I'm in. I'm actually in 2. Both of them are on YouTube. I'm in the Read the World series that I do on my channel, where I read books from different authors from different countries around the world. And I'm also in the Savvy Gaming Network's book club. That is also here on YouTube, and I will link it below. We have recently branched into video game book cookbook book club as well. So I have 2 books that are books, and then we also have done now the Five Nights at Freddy's cookbook, and we went into the Halo cookbook as well. So again, I will link the channel below. But the 2 books that we read for these 3 months were Fallout, New Vegas, All Roads, and that is by Chris I think it's Avallone. He is actually a writer on the Fallout series and the video game. And this is a comic that takes place right before the events of the Fallout New Vegas, which, if you're watching the television show, their season 2 has to do with New Vegas. If you are a fan of the game and or the show, I would recommend checking it out. It does talk about Benny and the Cons, is the joke that we made during it. Benny and the Cons. It does take place, the very end of it is like your character walking in the desert. So if you're not into Fallout or have not played Fallout, this will not make any sense to you whatsoever. It is free on archive.com, so if you are a fan of it, I would go check it out. The second book, we re-entered to the world of Halo, and we read Point of Light, and that is by Kelly Gay. And this is the 3rd book in a character arc. There's lots of books in the Halo world. There is a trilogy of books that are known as the Ace of Spades trilogy. Ace of Spades is the ship that they're on, and it deals with the same characters in all 3 books. We read the last of the 3, which for me, I'm not I know a little bit about Halo. We've read Halo books before, but I'm not super into Halo, so it takes me a good while to get into the universe, and they just kind of drop you in there in the beginning. So I was really lost until we started getting a little bit more into the characters. I had not read the previous 2 books, so I was just kind of lost in this book. It's really well written, although the end of it, we don't find out what happens to the characters, and this is the end of the trilogy. So I did give it 3 stars out of 5 because it just, I want to know what happens to them, and I don't think we're going to ever find out. There was a couple other issues that I have, and you can go check out our podcast about it, and again, linked below. But if you're into Halo, it's really well written. Kelly Gay writes a bunch of books for Halo, so I'd be interested to read something else. If you know Spark, the character in Halo, and I think he's mentioned in a bunch of different things for Halo, he is a prominent character in that book. And so if you're into Guilty Spark, then I would check out the series. I would start with the first one, and then move on to the other 2. The first one I think is super short. But yeah, Point of Light by Kelly Gay. The second book club is the Read the World series, so you may see some of these videos of me talking a little bit more about it in depth. I just posted the Cameroon videos So I'm going to talk briefly about those two books, but I'm not going to get super in depth. And then I'm still reading into the Canadian books, but I do have one of the Canadian books for you. Last time I talked about In the Shadow of the Banyan, and that was my fiction book for Cambodia, which was such a beautiful book and so tragic. I don't think I've ever cried that hard reading a book. But I did the same thing, which I'm starting to not do ever again, with Burundi, where I read two books that dealt with the same event. One was fiction, one was nonfiction, and I did the same for Canada, or not Canada, excuse me, for Cambodia, back to back. And Burundi and Cambodia were right after each other. I had to take a little break for a while, so I'm a little bit behind on my Read the World series. This is First They Killed My Father. This is Long Ung. This is the nonfiction version of the Under the Banyan. It's not as poetic as the other one, although the other one is really kind of semi-autobiographical because the author did go through similar things as a character. This one was difficult as well because of the things that her family goes through. She has 5 siblings and she's 5 at the start of this book. It starts very similar where they're in the capital city and they have to leave. They go from like camp to camp. They ended up having to separate for survival. They all go through really awful things. I will say, First They Killed My Father. Her father is not the first of her family members to die in this book, so I felt like that was a little deceptive, but I guess it's a catchy title. But if you are not familiar with what happened in Cambodia during the same time as the Vietnam War, Under the Banyan Tree, Under the Shadow of the Banyan for me was the better book of the two, but this is more of the non-fiction version. So she talks about her and her family, and she does have pictures in here as well. For the 2 Cameroon books, I have 2 fiction books because I was like, I'm not doing that again. I read Your Madness, Not Mine is a collection of 9 short stories. They're mainly focused on women. The author of this book is, I think it's Makuchi. She is like one of the first prominent female writers of Cameroon. At first, it's really dark, but then the stories go into a little bit more of the socio and some of the socioeconomic sides of Cameroon. So this gave me a little peek more into the culture. Houseboy, and this is Boyoyono. This book was so sad the whole way through. Our main character, he leaves his family to go kind of live and work in the church, and then the person that was running the church dies, and he becomes the houseboy for a French commandant. And both the books kind of talk a little bit about the colonial rule that happened with the British and the French. It does not really go into the German rule before them, but interesting because I didn't know that much about Cameroon. So again, each book and each visit is definitely a learning opportunity for me. I liked this book better. This book wasn't bad, but it's just, there's nothing happy that happens to this man, and so it's just sad the entire way. The last book for the Read the World series is the first audiobook that I chose for this one. That's just kind of was because it was available. It's for Canada, 5 Little Indians, and that's by Michelle Good. It was on a lot of people's reading lists, so it's one of the more popular books that I've read in this series. It's about 5 Native Canadian, Native Americans. They were put in the same Indian school that was mandatory for natives to go, and we had a little bit the same policies in the United States as well earlier. This is a little later on, and then some people actually escaped Canada to come to the United States to avoid those schools. They're all really sad stories, so I went from like sadness to sadness. I'm trying to pick up some more happy books for this series, but it's well written. It was just really sad. You have they survive Indian school to have just like awful things that they go through as adults. It is a little bit not current time period, so there's not a lot of opportunities for them when they come out, and they're kind of forced to deal with the white population that is not always happy to see them and very much takes advantage of them. So there's a bunch of trigger warnings that I would put out there, but like SA, suicide, drug use, all that stuff. So it's not a happy book, but it's an important part of Canadian history, so I'm glad that I read it. I actually read it because I wanted to have an Indigenous author, because I missed out on that for Australia, so I was like, I'll make sure that I do it, and I chose what I thought was an Indigenous author, and turned out not to be for one of the book versions, so I'll talk about that when I talk about Canada in the Read the World series. But it's not a bad book, but it's just really sad. Before we jump into the banned and fiction, let's talk about nonfiction. And I have my first DNF to talk about, and that is The Mind-Gut Connection. And this is by Amirian Mayer. I DNF'd this book. It was an audiobook about 60% of the way through. And usually when I have made it over 50%, I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I've put in the time. This book really started to make me upset and mad, and so I said, we're not doing this. And so I've gotten a lot better at DNFing books. I liked the initial idea of this book, which is that, your gut microbes affect your brain, and the fact that we are kind of like ecosystems for tons of different bacteria, and we have like skin mites and things like that. But the fact that we are an ecosystem, I thought was really interesting, and a really interesting way to look at health in your body. Then Mayer, he is a gastroenterologist, and doctors are specialists for a reason, because they can't not know everything about everything. And he definitely starts going into different fields that he does not know a lot of information about. So I have a background in psychology. He talks a lot about psychology, and he talks about, like, he's a really big fan of Jung, which is fine. But he starts to turn it a little bit more medical, where that's not really what Jung does and what his theories are. And then what really killed this book for me is that he started talking about how C-sections cause autism because they're not involved with the microbes of the mom's lady bits, to be a little less forward. And so I was like, no, absolutely not. You're not a gynecologist. No, we're not going into that. So that's when I was like, no, not having it. It got worse before that, and then I was like, let me hear him out. And then again, 60% of the way through, I was like, sir, we are not doing this. That leads me into one of the books that I actually really liked from nonfiction. I read Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. John Green definitely is a man who has an interest and will research the crap out of it, and he does this with tuberculosis. This book could have been a lot longer. He does do the audiobook, so he's a great reader as well as a great writer. It is interesting to see, tuberculosis is making a comeback, how it used to be such a bigger thing in our culture. We definitely, in the United States, we had tuberculosis hospitals. There were people that were trying to get like the tuberculosis look. As a teacher, we get tested for TB every 4 years. So for me, it's not as a surprise about some of the information, just because it is something that we do get tested for, where some other people may have thought maybe that it was something definitely in the past, but it is making a comeback. So it was really interesting. He does divide it into different kind of categories and time periods. It is largely US inspired, but there is stuff about like the UK and things like that. Another book that shocked me, I went to the Mom Museum in Las Vegas, which is fantastic if you get a chance to go, and I saw a book in the bookshop that was called The Ghost of Eden Park. It's the bootleg king, the woman who pursued him, and the murder that shocked the jazz age. And this is by Karen Abbott. I didn't know who George Remus was. He is the #1 bootlegger in United States history during Prohibition. We know a lot about Al Capone. and some of the other gangsters of that time period. But the most successful one is George Remus, and he made a lot of money. And she talks about how he spent that money. And when she was talking about the millions and millions of dollars that he made in like the 1930s, that's impressive because that was a difficult time period in the United States. It's called The Ghost of Eden Park because he does end up murdering someone, and it is about the trial. So it's his life up before that. We have the event as well as what happens to him afterwards. So it is a huge, long story. The assistant attorney general is one of the women that's pursuing him, and there is a person that she sends to investigate that he ends up becoming kind of dirty and involved with the man's wife. So it's scandalous. It's a big jazz age thing. If you're into the jazz age, mobsters, and like bootlegging and things like that, I would definitely check this book out. It's read by two different narrators, and it's like mainly about four people, but George Remus is definitely the center figure in that. But yeah, I'm super glad that I saw it and that I checked it out because it was really entertaining. Kind of going a little totally different direction. I read All the World's a Stage by Bill Bryson. I've read several Bill Bryson books. This one is about Shakespeare, and in particular where we get our information that we know about Shakespeare. Because for someone being so famous and so well known, people all around the world read Shakespeare and plays. We don't know that much about him. He has like 6 signatures that we've seen his name. They're spelled differently. He does talk about that and why that's not disqualifying for him to be a writer, like so many people think that it is. So I found that to be really interesting. And then he talks about the people that have researched Shakespeare, as well as a lot of people when they get the Shakespeare play, especially in school, you get the Folger edition, and he talks about the Folger Museum and that they're the number one like curated, which is weird because they're in the United States. They have the biggest collection of authentic Shakespearean writings and the folios. So that was also really interesting. I'm trying to read the books that I own, and I do own a couple collections of Shakespearean plays, so I'm going to try. That's one of my goals next year is to read through those. So I wanted to do a little pre-information gathering about Shakespeare himself, because I know that we don't know that much about him, but the information on where that information comes from I thought was really interesting. Although if you're not into research, it'll be super boring. And the last of the nonfiction was a popular book at the beginning of the year, and I ended up reading it closer towards the end. And this is Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny. It is 20 lessons. You should just watch the video instead of reading it. It's comparing our modern times in the United States to Nazi Germany. And I mean, there's a couple other authoritarian governments that he talks about, but it's mostly Nazi Germany, which, as someone who taught history and like studies history, they got a lot of their stuff from us during the Civil War. So it's kind of a roundabout way. Again, I would just listen to, he has got a couple lectures that, it's a pretty short book, but I would recommend just listening to the lectures because it's all stuff that we've heard before. It's not really anything new. All right, the banned books that I have, again, that was a new category this year. I don't have that many. I only have 2 to talk about, and I only read one of them. So, and that's not banned, it's been challenged. So, the one that I saw, which I knew nothing about, was A Yellow Raft in Blue Water, and that's by Michael Doris. And I went onto Goodreads, and there was a bunch of 5 stars, like, oh, I read this in high school. Oh, it's so great. I started listening to it, and it's about 3 Native American women. It's 3 generations, and you actually go backwards. So you have the daughter, the mom, and then the grandmother, and they're each in the different sections. The daughter is, she gets left by her mom, who is, it starts off with her mom in the hospital, and then we see a little bit about the crazy that's happening, and then she leaves her with her grandmother, There's a point where her name's Rayona is the daughter's name. She ends up hanging out with a priest, and I was like, oh, this is not gonna go well. And it didn't. So I had like a this like feeling in my stomach the whole time that I was reading it, and it was not enjoyable for me. And so I put a pause on it actually before the end of Rayona's story, and the things that I read said that her story was the best, and that was the first story. And then I looked a little bit into maybe why this book is banned, and then I looked into the author. So Michael Doris took his own life. He took his own life right before he was being investigated because one of his children came out and said that he was inappropriate with them, to be PG about it. And so he did not make it to trial. I guess his wife has a book sort of about it. It's like a fictionalized version of going through tragedy, which I would be interested to read that. Michael Doris, I guess, was a proponent of Native Americans in literature, and then this happened. So I would not recommend it as a book in the first place, and then I would really not recommend it after I found a little bit more about it. A book that, I guess the other book that I have, it's challenged, so it's not necessarily banned yet that I know of. I did kind of try to look into it. So it was challenged in Texas for language. And that is Bud, Not Buddy. And this is Christopher Paul Curtis. This is a book that when I taught 6th grade was an option for us to read. And we chose the other book, which is Walk Two Moons. And so I didn't get a chance to read this book or teach it. But I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I listened to the audio, which is great. It is about Bud, not Buddy, right? His name is Bud. He is 10 and he lives in Flint, Michigan. His mom died when he was 6, so 4 years previously, and this is during the Depression, and he's living in a home. At the beginning of the book, he gets put into like a foster family situation, and they are not the nicest people. The son ends up putting the pencil in his nose, and that's what a lot of people remember from this book. So he decides to leave the house and goes to search for his father. He doesn't fully know who his father is, but there's clues that his mom left behind, and so he decides to go to Grand Rapids to meet the man he thinks is his father. I don't remember the language being that much of an issue at all, so I don't know why this book is really challenged. So obviously he's in a foster situation. It's not great. It does end up, like, the ending is great. He does end up finding a family, although it's not the family he expected. So I would recommend this book. I'm not fully sure why they decided to challenge it, but I hope that it wasn't banned, because it's an excellent book, and I hope to read more of Curtis's books in the future. There is a book that I thought was banned because I've seen it on some banned lists, but then when I tried to do some more research on where it was banned or why it was banned, I couldn't find it. And that book is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. I know some of the other Ray Bradbury books are banned, but this one, I guess it's not. So it came off my banned list and just onto the fiction list, which is what we're talking about in this last category. I liked Something Wicked This Way Come. I read it on Kindle. It's really in 3 different parts. It's about 2 13-year-old boys who they live in Greentown, which, if you're familiar with Bradbury, he has several books that are set in Greentown, and if you have not read Dandelion Wine, I recommend it because it's so beautifully written about, childhood and growing up in a small town, and this is set in that same town. And so you have William and Jem, our 2 friends that live next door to each other. They do everything together. The big thing with them is, like, they want to make sure that they stay together and not like, oh, you'll never leave me, right? Like, it's just a beautiful friendship book. But there's a carnival that comes into town. The boys wake up because they hear the sounds of the train, and they go investigate it, and they see a little too much. And so this carnival is not always what it seems to be. And then because they've seen too much, the freaks or the carnies come after them. And it's a good thriller book. I was a little disappointed with the end, but like reading about where the inspiration for this book came from. I can really see that Bradbury was in a part of his life, because he was like 40 when he wrote this, where you have the dad, who's an older dad, he's in his 50s. He sees that his relationship with his younger son is not what it should be. And you see the youth of the younger son, and you see what the dad feels like he's too old for stuff, and it's them kind of coming together. And so you have this like loss of childhood, but then you also have this regaining of youth from the dad. And that's kind of what the themes that I saw throughout the book that had to do with like growing older or like wanting to regain your youth. And that was a big theme that I saw throughout the book. So knowing a little bit more about that from Bradbury and what his inspiration for this was, I thought gave a little deeper meaning to my reading. One of the books that I DNF'd was, again, another really popular one, The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. I just could not get into this book. I tried. I lasted probably about 30% of the way. It's a book about a lost bookshop, and it's in 2 time periods. I just didn't really care about either time period, so I decided to let it go. Because I just couldn't like get interested in it, which was weird because it reminded me a little bit of The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, which I did finish, mainly because I wanted to see what happens with the younger girl. So The Lost Apothecary is also told on 2 time periods. We have modern day times where a woman goes to London, what was supposed to be her 10th wedding anniversary. She found out her husband was cheating on her, so she went by herself. She gets pulled into this mudlarking thing because she doesn't want to do the itinerary that she had planned for her and her husband. And she finds a little bottle. That bottle is from an apothecary shop, and so she does information to find out about it. Then we also get the time period of where that bottle comes from. There is an apothecary killer, and we find out who that is. And there's also she's a woman who, basically her apothecary box. You find this out like super early in the book, which is why it's not a spoiler, but her shop is there to help women, both with the things that ail them and to get rid of the men that hurt them. And one of her clients is this young girl who works for a woman whose husband is inappropriate with her, and so that's kind of how they meet in the beginning. And so she helps her like get rid of him, and so she's really, the little younger girl is interested in this life, and so she wants to become her apprentice, but the apothecary woman is not about it. She's trying to protect her and save her, and then stuff goes awry. So I liked the old time story about the apothecary way better than I liked the modern day one of the woman investigating. I felt like that took away from the older time story. But it was an interesting point of view, but I just wish that it would have been 1 time period instead of 2. I'm getting really tired of jumping in between time periods. I feel like there's so many books that do that, and I'm just like, can we stick to 1 story, please? That would be great. Some of the other books that I was not so into, I read another Kristen Hanna. This one was The Great Alone. A lot of people really liked this book. I did not. I'm not like a survivalist. I don't want to go live in the woods or, go to Alaska, which is what happens in this book. The thing about the dad in this book and the mom, so the dad's abusive and the mom is not protecting her daughter. And I just think they're both the worst characters. I was not happy about them. The supporting characters I really loved. That was great. It was not a book for me. And I've never been so happy for a character to die in any of my readings. So I'm not going to recommend The Great Alone. There's other Kristen Hanna books that I really enjoyed. The last 2 that I read, though, were not for me. So if you liked them, great. I'm so glad you did. It was just not for me. I also read a book that I've never read before. One of the Little House on the Prairie books. I've never read that series growing up. This was Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's the first book of the Little House series. It is mostly about food. I will tell you that. I feel like the story of Wilder, to me, is more interesting than her books. It is about survival in the prairie. Mom slaps a bear. That was kind of exciting. But I'm not the age range for it. I'm not also, it just wasn't interesting to me. But now I know how they made food, because that's pretty much what this book was about, was food. One of the books that surprised me, because I was having some issues with cozy fantasy. Then I read this book, In the Company of Witches. This was one of my October reads. I chose 3 books to read that I've been sitting on my shelf forever. This is Orly Wallace. It is about a family that owns a B&B, and they are witches. I guess she's the niece. Her husband had previously passed away, and so she's no longer using her powers. Doesn't want to be involved with this world because some of her powers are talking to the dead. That's a little touchy once your husband dies. There is a murder or a death in their B&B, and that starts a whole bunch of things that happen. I really enjoyed this book. I would love to continue reading the series. This is the type of cozy fantasy that I can get behind, because the last couple ones were really not just for me, but I really, really enjoyed this book. Another book that I liked was All Systems Red as Martha Wells. It's something that a lot of people are like, oh, if you like sci-fi, you got to read Martha Wells. You got to read Martha Wells. They just came out with the Murderbot series on Apple TV, which I saw the first episode of, is basically the book. There is a Sentinel robot that has taken away the guardianship chip that he has, so he's able to work a little bit more independently, and he's there to protect these group of scientists on a planet. He's quirky. He's quirky. I would have liked this book better if they don't just throw you in at the beginning. I think the show was a little bit better at describing kind of what was happening in this world than the book itself. Also, the ending for me was weird, which I think just because it's a full-on series, that was like leading on to the next one. But I was just kind of like, wait, that's the end? That's how it ends? So I will probably continue to read some of the series, but if you're into sci-fi, you should definitely check out Martha Wells and Murderbot, because he's a great character. And I think Skarsgård was a great choice for him as the actor for the character. Another book that I had never heard of, that was on someone on Bookstagram was like, this is my favorite book, I recommend it to everyone, was The Life We Bury by Alan Eskins. I had never heard of this book. I'm so glad I read it. It is about a college student. His name is, oh, I don't even have it on here, Joe Talbert. Wow, see, I remembered it. It was one of the last books that I read for this year. The audiobook is actually pretty good. He is a college student, and he has to interview an older person, and we find out that his grandfather dies, so he doesn't really have older people in his life. His mom's a mess. She's an alcoholic, and she's an awful, awful person. So he goes to an old person's home and says, like, hey, can I interview someone here? And they're like, we don't really do that, but we have this guy named Carl. Yeah, he's dying of cancer. Also, he's a convicted murderer. And so he's like, I guess I'll talk to him if he'll talk to me. And so he starts to interview him. It's like his deathbed confessional, kind of. Carl does tell us that he has both killed and murdered. And then throughout the interview process and Talbert's investigation of the crime, because he has to have multiple sources for his biography, he finds out that Carl might not be the murderer. And the fact that now he's got to figure out what Carl meant when he said that he's murdered and killed. And so we find out more about Carl's life. Carl was in Vietnam, as well as some other things that are happening to him. So very interesting. If you like mysteries, check it out. The last 4 books that I'm talking about, I have 4 books left. They are some of the better reads that I've read in the last 3 months. I gave them all 4 stars. Some of them definitely would be 4.5 if Goodreads would finally allow half stars. Come on, Goodreads, get your act together. One was The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. You hear about this story all the time. It's super short. I would recommend most people read it. If you're not into like horror or like psychological stuff, then don't. But it's one of the most well-known stories out there. A woman goes to a house that her husband like sets her up with, but he's not there all the time. And she starts to lose it. And she thinks there's something in the wallpaper. It's a really, really short story. You can read it in less than an hour, depending on your reading speed. But it's a good psychological thriller. And again, it's one of the most well-known stories out there. If you don't know about Yellow Wallpaper, like I've seen it so many times, and I finally was like, okay, I'm just gonna read it, and it's written pretty well. She's definitely crazy, but it might not be her fault, and that's kind of, it's up to you as the reader to decide whether she's crazy or not. So yeah, I would, again, it's super short. Check it out. Trying to see the order that we're gonna go in. These are all, the rest ones are all kind of like fantasy. I'll leave that one for last. So Eva Evergreen was one of my other December reads, and that's The Semi-Magical Witch, and that's by Julie Abe. What a cute book. I loved it. Especially if you're into like Kiki's Delivery Service. She has become a novice witch. She doesn't have a whole lot of power. And if she does use her power, it like wipes her out. And so part of being a novice witch is you have to go to be a witch at a town. It's like a trial basis, and they have to recommend you to be promoted. There's political stuff that happens, but she really tries her hardest. She's really young, and she messes up, and she makes friends, and people try to look out for her. It's super sweet. It's kind of, well, the stakes are kind of large for them, but really it's kind of like lower ones. It definitely looks like there's... I would show you, but I actually lent it out to someone because I really liked it. There's drawings in it that are super cute. It looks like an anime. If you're into, like, again, Kiki's or like witch stuff, like definitely check it out. It's so cute. I've had it for years, and I finally was like, I'm just gonna read it, and I'm so glad I did. One of the other books that I've also had for years, it was another one of my December reads. Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I've had this book probably for 5 years because I had a student that was like, this is one of my favorite books, you should definitely read it. And so I bought it, and then I finally got around to reading it. Scythe is about a dystopian future where we have found the key to immorality, and it has to do with like nanobots and things like that. But because of that, in order to curb overpopulation, there is a group of people that are the Scythes, and they are here to give you like your final death. And so they have a quota that they have to reach every year. And there are rules to that. In between each chapter, you get a little bit of a diary of a Scythe because they have to have their diaries public. And there is like a huge power struggle, and it's like talks about morality. There are other books in the Scythe series. It does get a little violent, so it's not necessarily for kids, but I actually really liked it. I would have given it 5 stars, but it's a little too close to a current political climate that we are having here, so it got a little too real in the sci-fi. But writing wise, Neil Shusterman, I mean, he writes pretty well. So characters were great. There was a little thing, some of it was a little predictable, which is, you know, I read a lot, so it's not surprising. But I would, again, if you're into sci-fi, fantasy, stuff like that, especially in dystopian fiction, then if you have not checked it out yet, because I'm apparently super late to the game, I would recommend it. And the last one is, again, another book that I've had for about 2 years. I've had the audio version of it, but I had it on like CDs, so there's not a lot of disc players available anymore. But I managed to get it through Libby as well. And that is Skyhunter by Marie Lu. I've read Marie Lu before. She's a great YA author. This one has to do with like imperialism and what happens to those people who are left behind. One of them becomes like their like warrior people. Like it's this, the society is set up in such an odd way where there's like the striker, and they're paired together. There are rules that come about, but the main character, she's mute and she's foreign. So she's got 2 strikes against her, and she gets paired with, she does sign language as well. So she gets paired with someone who they were going to put to death, but they decide, she speaks up for him. So they're like, fine, your punishment is that you're going to be paired with him. And if he dies, you die. So good luck with that. And then she finds out more information about him and more information about what's actually happening politically. And the other side tries to get him back because he is an experiment that is important to them. It was great. Characters great. The world building, fantastic. Marie Lu, you can't really go wrong with Marie Lu. So there's more books in the series, so I definitely will be checking out the other books, hopefully this year. And that's it for my 2025 fourth quarter reads. I'll be coming out with the best and the worst here shortly.